Hi, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is a Zen master. His name's Sebastian. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Zen Master Sebastian Rizon, and I am the founder and lead master at the Zen Art Center in Somerville, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. Um, Prior to starting this school, I lived in a Zen temple for 16 years with my teacher, great Zen master Chengsi Kim, and that's my background and where I learned from. I don't know what else, I'm also an artist and a writer and um,
That's amazing.
I wear a lot of different hats, I should say.
That's great. The art behind is yours, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, it's so
Um,
beautiful.
Small sample from behind me. I have a art studio, which I teach out of, right outside of Boston in Somerville. Yeah. So that's a
That's awesome.
small
What's
piece of
your
it.
primary medium? What do you use to like?
I've been kind of well, I'm self-taught, so I've been learning a lot of different things. My primary medium for physical drawing is drawing. I also paint and I use markers, but I've been delving a lot into digital lately. um, I even got into some wood burning
Oh,
a little
that's
bit,
awesome.
so I'm kind of whatever suits my fancy for the day. I'm still kind of, I just enjoy the process of creating. And it's
That's
more for
amazing.
me, a method of communication. I give talks in teaching Zen, but I also use visual art as a form of communication, and I write poetry. And, I actually have a manuscript for a book, which is not published, but I've been working on that recently and trying to go through the process of figuring out
Oh
how to get that
yeah.
published.
That's
So,
awesome. That's cool. I love wood burning myself. I've done that since I was a kid, and I did a publishing certificate at Denver University last month. So I actually have learned a lot about publishing.
oh,
It's a very interesting process. Uh,
well, I might
um,
have to pick your brain about that in a different interview, perhaps.
that would be great. And what was it like living in a Zen temple for 16 years?
Yeah. Well, it was different depending on, when I was there. When I
Yeah.
first moved in, it was a bit of a culture shock, um, growing up in America. uh, And the temple was in America as well, but
Oh
it's
wow.
just not the type of culture I was typically exposed to growing up
Right.
in Vermont. I don't ever think I had met anyone who was a Zen practitioner or a Buddhist that I know of, prior to coming to Boston for college. Um, yeah, so at first it was, and my teacher was from Korea, so there was a lot of Korean cultural things mixed into the practice. So, it was a bit of a culture shock. I started eating, spicier Korean food, oftentimes for breakfast. But then there's, a whole routine of practice that you have to do, bowing and chanting in the morning, um, and then meditating. And the school I went to, it was a Zen martial arts school too. So
Oh wow.
I was practicing a sword style and a karate style as well. So, um, yeah, but I was still, at that time working a regular job, 40 hours a week. And then just before I go to work, doing bowing, chanting, and meditation, and coming home and doing the martial arts practice in the evening. And then it's, it's kind of communal living.
Oh wow.
So, there was sometimes as many as 10 people living in there. So, in that sense, it was a great experience as far as like learning about people, and also getting to learn from my teacher kind of how to incorporate Zen and meditation practice into regular life, which is something, I had read about Zen in books prior to ever, studying it. And I always kind of wondered, how do you apply this stuff when you have like a regular life and
Yeah,
regular, like real people, responsibilities? I didn't feel like I could go live up in a mountaintop monastery or something like that.
that makes sense.
So it was really a beautiful thing for me because it really helped me do it and learn how to incorporate it into my regular life. And I think that is one of the things I'm trying to impart to other people, is like imparting that knowledge he shared with me and sharing that with other people about how they can make this a part of their life. So,
So how do you think like what do you think got you initially hooked onto going into the Zen temple? What do you think was that final push, the thing that made you take the leap into the practice?
well, I think I had kind of reached a point in my life where I had a decent job. I was making decent money, and I just felt like I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't
Mm,
want that to be it,
yeah.
where I felt like something was missing. So I started, I would always talk about philosophy and things like that with my housemates at the time, and he got
Hmm.
me into reading a book about Taoism, one of my housemates at the time. And I'd always been interested in Buddhism just from reading books like Siddhartha and a few other, more contemporary books.
Hmm.
Um, but I didn't know a lot about it. But I was always fascinated by the idea of, meditating and attaining enlightenment and achieving inner peace. And at that point, I was in my 20s, and I didn't feel like I had that really, maybe for little short periods of time. But so, yeah, I was really fascinated by that. And I had also studied martial arts as a child. So that same housemate, told me there was a school down the street, which was a Buddhist school, and they also teach martial arts. And I had never heard of anything. I had heard about like Shaolin and things like that in China, but I thought
Mm.
you had to kind of go there. But this was literally a couple blocks away from where I lived. So
Wow.
I just went there, and they had like, um, martial arts classes, in the evening. So I started doing that. And then I honestly, after I think a couple months, I had to move. I was My housemates were leaving, so I had to find a new place to live, and I just decided I was going to move in there because they
That's
had a
so
residential
cool.
program. And um, yeah, it was. I remember feeling like it was a big leap because it had like a pretty rigorous routine as far as like your time commitment outside of work, was probably like 15 to 20 hours a week depending
Oh,
on the
wow.
week. So between the martial arts classes, the bowing and chanting in the morning, and yeah, and then we did work around the temple as well, as part of our work and learning process. So
That's
that
super
that's
cool.
that's in a nutshell what it was like. Yeah, there's probably a lot of details I'm leaving out over 16 years,
Well, that makes sense. What
but
do you like think was one of the what was a time when your knowledge and the wisdom you gained from Buddhism was tested the most? There's usually moments in people's lives where they have a hard time like doing the same things as they would or sticking to the principles. I was just curious if you had any key moments.
key moments, that's a little bit hard to pinpoint, I think.
Were there any moments where you felt like you were like putting your knowledge to the test? It was like, uh,
Absolutely. I'm just trying to think of like a good story or something. Yeah, well, I think there were times where the routine could be very demanding. So sometimes, I think I would question, is this something I want to continue doing? There were years for me when it was really difficult, um, where you don't feel like you're making progress or something like that. But yeah, I had like numerous times in my life where um, it did come in really, helpful. Over 16 years, um, it definitely, saved me in a lot of ways. There were a lot of personal challenges over 16 years.
right,
Like I had grandparents die, um, you know, serious illnesses in my family. Um, Later on, I had one of my best friends die, like very suddenly,
oh,
and I think those were pretty trying times for me, but definitely um, my practice made that easier to deal with. I think one of the things and to elaborate on why, um, one of the things my teacher had always really not stressed, stress is the wrong word. One of the things he had really emphasized was the importance of having a routine and sticking to it and doing the same things every day. So every day bowing and chanting, every day meditating, every day training. And it's kind of built into the rituals of the temple, through bowing and chanting and sitting meditation in the morning. Um, but even when I went like on vacation or took a weekend away from the temple, he would tell me, keep going, do it every day. So at one point I had
hmm.
gone, I think, yeah, just over 16 years of training every single day.
Oh, wow.
And so when those things came up, and there were other, less things, death is pretty final, but there were other smaller challenges along the way. But the thing that happens is, these things happen and they affect you. They make you sad. They make you think about life. These are the types of things that can often lead to like deeper sadness, depression, um, things like that. But having a routine built into your life helps you really clear out those emotions at least once a day. I mean, they still come back, but you're constantly, cleaning out your emotions and learning how to like put them down, and you still have to deal with them, but when you can clear them out once in a while, they don't snowball in the same way, and they don't gain as much momentum in your mind. So for me, it was like having that to rely on even when I was really sad or something like that. um I always had like certain moments of peace in my day, and I don't think it took a long time to feel like I could extend that out of those moments, but
Right.
over time, I learned to do that as well. But
So what did it feel like when you would extend those moments? And at what point in your practice did you start to really feel that?
um, well, I think it was very gradual. So I don't think there was like a specific turning point. But it kind of over time, it would be, at first it was, say I would wake up in the morning and do bowing and chanting, so I'd have a moment of peace during that time. And chanting is like a form of meditation. It's just like a really long mantra, basically. So you're using that
Okay.
to focus your mind on that. And then when you're trying to recite a chant, and this was in a different language, so it's
Yeah.
basically like a lot of syllables I'm not really familiar with. So it forces you to really focus your mind. And when you're
Hmm.
focused on one thing, then you can't let your mind wander, or else you start messing up the chant.
Oh,
So it
right.
kind of forces you into that. And martial arts is another form of that practice where really have to focus on that, or else you start to make mistakes. If your mind starts to wander into like, oh, I'm really sad about this incident or something like that, you start to make mistakes. So that process of learning to focus your mind is what pushes out the other thoughts and
Hmm.
clears your mind. And having that built into my routine really helped me overcome those. And I think living at the temple, this kind of circles back to your other question.
Right.
Uh, we did a lot of different practices at the temple, as far as living practice is part of that, is learning how to focus on what you're doing at the temple. So we had cleaning responsibilities, cooking responsibilities, things like that. We did work around the temple once a week. And so you're also supposed to be learning how to focus your mind on those tasks as well. So um, for me, the place that really started to click was when I was doing martial arts,
Okay.
and then in the chanting. But then it started to be like, okay, cooking is another thing, and it always seems to take hold faster in the things that you're more interested in, and the other activities at the temple, the cleaning, things like that. They become another way to learn how to focus your mind, and that was something really like the focus of the temple life was learning how to apply those things to the other aspects of your life. So with cooking, if you're burning the food, that means you're not paying attention to what you're doing. So my teacher was really insistent that all the food tastes good, and he would let you know if you made a mistake or like overcook something. He'd be like, "Oh, you weren't clear when you made this food." Or if you're doing some work around the temple, like sweeping the floor, if he found a piece of dust, he would be like, "Oh, that means your mind isn't clear." So it kind of those are the things that like they can wear on you a little bit, but if he had infinite patience as far as telling you every single time you made a mistake, and also sticking with you and not getting like too upset if you're making mistakes, but also always reminding you and trying to help you to keep your mind clear. And so the things that you are most for me, the things that I was most interested in, like the martial arts, and I learned how to cook there, basically.
Mm.
um those were the things that I think I naturally wanted to focus on.
Right.
The cleaning less so, but you start to learn how to apply it to everything you're doing, and then it starts to creep into your work. And at the job I was doing, after a few years, my boss was saying, "Oh, I've really noticed a difference in your work since you started living at this temple."
Oh, that's
um,
cool.
so it seemed to be, I noticed it within myself, but it seemed to be making an impact on other parts of my life as well.
And what did you work doing at the time?
At the time, I was an engineer. I
Oh,
did
wow.
structural engineering, so like designing buildings and the framework of buildings, things like that.
Oh, wow.
So I did that, for 10 years while I was living at the temple. Then I got so into it that I started teaching the martial art around Boston. And so I started a program doing that and teaching Zen and meditation as part of that. Um, yeah. So that's kind of
That's
where the
so cool.
transition started. And then about 3 years ago right now, my teacher passed away. And
Oh,
that is then, another time where my practice really helped me through that, because he was one of the, most influential people in my life.
oh wow.
And it happened kind of suddenly. So, he got sick with cancer and passed away in like 2 years. And for most of the time, he was like recovering. So I always thought he was going to get better. And then it just, kind of quickly went downhill and he passed away.
Oh,
So it was a little bit of a shock. I kind of could see it coming. But at that point, I had kind of decided, prior to him getting sick, I was thinking I was going to start my own school as well. And I was already kind of doing a school for martial arts, but I was thinking I would do a Zen practice. But I kind of stuck around while he was sick because I wanted to be close to him. So I could, I thought he was a wonderful resource about life. So I wanted to get as much, to share as much of his knowledge as I could before he passed away. But yeah, that's kind of my transition to here. And through all of my meditation and martial arts practice, I actually started to, like, for lack of a better word, channel art through my meditation. So I had never been
wow.
an artist. And so all of my art started to come through that. Like I had never been an artist, and my art was actually pretty bad when I was younger. But then all of a
Wow.
sudden, I was able to draw really well, kind of out of nowhere. And um, during the time he was sick, I actually wrote a book uh, about Zen, and so I kind of saw my path diverging. He taught me Zen through martial arts, and I learned that you can teach Zen through any art form. And
Really? Wow.
so one of the things I'm trying to do was, and why I called my school the Zen Art Center, is because I've learned that you can treat any art as a form of meditation, any art form. And I use the word art very loosely to mean anything you put your heart into.
Right.
So anything you put you're passionate about, basically, or so it could be music, it could be visual art, it could be writing. I've worked I'm not an art teacher, but I teach kind of how to apply meditation to art. And I think that's one of it's kind of what I see my purpose in life now, is to help people understand that you can turn anything you're doing into a meditation. Because for me, just sitting and meditating was really difficult for me, and I
Yeah.
was never actually really able to do that on my own. It wasn't
Mm.
until I started to use other forms, and in this case, like art forms and meditation, martial arts forms, as a form of moving meditation, as a way to focus my mind on what I was doing. And then after I was able to do that, like, sitting meditation became much easier. But for me, as like a younger person, like, I just had a lot of energy, and sitting
Right.
still was really difficult for me. More
Mm.
so than like doing martial arts or running. Sitting still was
Sure.
actually harder.
That
So
makes sense. I made a post the other day about meditation on Instagram threads. And I noticed a lot of my content's about autism. I make like TikTok videos and stuff. And I noticed in our community, it's actually pretty common, especially people who also have ADHD, to be able to sit and I guess they had a similar difficulty. A lot of people being able to focus on the sitting meditation for whatever reason. And I guess what do you think causes the like misconception that the meditation has to be like sitting with your eyes closed, like, like in a certain position? What do you think like contributes to that like stereotype?
Yeah, I don't know. I think and to be honest, that's what I thought it was initially.
Yeah,
I thought that's all it was. And I had never really heard this other approach until I met my teacher, and that's what made him very unique. I've realized his teacher taught the same thing, so it's not unique to him. His use of the martial arts was unique,
right,
but I think the term zazen, which is more of a Japanese word. I come from a Korean lineage, but
right.
I think that does specifically mean sitting meditation, and so I don't really know. And in the story of Buddha, he's sitting and meditating, um,
Hmm.
but when my teacher, his teacher was great Zen master Sung San. He founded a lot of Zen schools around the world. But when he was teaching about the Heart Sutra, which is one of the chants and part of Mahayana Buddhism, his takeaway from the lesson was that Buddha didn't just sit. He actually, after he got enlightenment, he went and did action, and he went and taught, and he
Right.
went and helped people. So that he was saying, you can't just sit your whole life. You need to learn how to apply this to all aspects of your life. And yeah, I don't know what contributes to that, and I certainly had the same ideas about it that you were saying. So but I think that's kind of one of the unique approaches that I can help people. It's not my original idea, but I think I'm one of the few people I've heard talking about this approach to it, especially now that my teacher's not here. So I definitely feel that I bring something different to the table than a lot of other Buddhists and Zen practitioners. I mean, to be honest, I don't know a lot of other ones. I kind of just found my teacher and followed him. So
Well,
I have a very narrow um, perspective on like what's out there because I just really never looked too far. But I think you're right. That's mostly what I see out there when I do look around. And also, I've been, now that I've had my own school, I have students coming here and telling me like that they have never thought about it like this and struggle with some of the same things I struggle with. And I kind of figured I wasn't the only one going through this, but you never know till you start to put it out there. And I got the sense like a lot of people were facing the same kind of challenges I had. So I thought it was really important to try and reach people were in the same who are in the same position I was in. So that's really what I see as my responsibility as one of my teacher students is to carry on that tradition and continue teaching.
that's
And
so amazing. It seems like you have the torch in your hand now, kind of vibe. Like you're
yeah,
carrying on the legacy of someone that really helped you through your like youth into like finding your peace.
yeah, and that's you know I was struggling in like prior to moving into the temple, struggling with. I never really was diagnosed with anything, but I think
Right.
there were bouts of depression,
Hmm.
and I certainly had really bad anxiety, and that I was very aware of, and social anxiety, things like that. So, and then I don't have any of that anymore. After it took
Oh
years and
wow.
years and years, and I thought yeah, I don't know when it really changed, but now I don't really have anxiety anymore. Like having these kind of interviews
Wow.
would have really stressed me out, you know, 15 years ago. But now maybe it's probably longer than that now, but the point is, it really did help me, and I see a lot of people struggling with the same things, the same types of issues I had. And if I can help anybody, even just one or two people, I mean, that's pretty meaningful to me. But I think it's something that you know our society seems to need help with, and
Definitely.
I don't see a lot of people out there. I mean, there are people giving, trying to offer help. So, but it's
So
not something like that's really easy to access all the time. And
that's
so,
true. What do you think about, like, other than the rituals in the temple and the like the specific activities you'd put your focus into? What was it about that kind of environment that like created a sense of tranquility that maybe other types of institutions in our society could maybe implement to like make people feel more like at peace and like connected to the like themselves and others?
yeah, um, I think living in kind of a communal environment like that, and I think in our society, we can very easily isolate ourselves, especially, after the pandemic and things like that. People became very isolated.
Right,
And I think people got even more isolated than they were. But even with, like, social media, things like that, you can stay pretty isolated and still feel like you're interacting. But
right,
it's totally different than when you're living with someone and living with a big group of people, and you really have to learn how to get along and have a cooperative life and figure out um, how to do that and how to apply these things in real time in your life. So it's not just having someone tell you, oh, you need to go out and do these things. It's you have to do them. And so I think having that is important. And then I'd say that the other, maybe even bigger thing, was just having someone in your life that is compassionate and being compassionate to you, teaching you how to take care of yourself, and teaching you the importance of compassion. And when I say compassion, I mean helping other people. And in Buddhist terms, you would say, helping people to alleviate their suffering. So that is um, really like the core foundational thing at the heart of everything I'm trying to do is just help other people. And um, I think that is one of the things that actually really does make you feel better, is helping other
right,
people. So if you go out and buy yourself a bunch of stuff, you might feel good for a little while, but it's kind of short lasting, at least for
right.
me. But if you go out and help someone and they smile and they sit, they're like really thankful, like that feeling can stick with you for a long time. And if you do a little bit of that every day, then it really starts to add a different type of value to your life. Not like monetarily, but like that you're um, helping people, and then um, the better off everybody is, and that the happier people are, and the more able they are to take care of themselves, the better off the whole world is going to be. And so that's kind of like um, kind of the how I hope things will unfold. I can't
Right.
do all of these things by myself, but I can do whatever small part I can. And my teacher used to always say, um, I don't remember the story exactly who it was in regards to, but he said one of his students came in and said, "Oh, uh, you know, I feel like I feel bad, like I have all these problems." And he was like, "Oh, go home and give your wife a massage. That'll make you feel better. Like, so like just like help someone else, you know, don't think about yourself. And I do really it I never thought about it that way, but it's one of the truest things I've ever heard. So
That's a good line. I feel like for me, I moved in with my girlfriend almost a year ago, and I definitely can relate to that, like communal, like just compassion, like just living with like my partner, has made has definitely opened my mind and my heart to like how to get along in such an intimate like way. Whereas when you before you live with someone, it's like you don't really even know the person past a certain point. Like you get to really know someone when you like know their patterns, their routines, their like just certain details that you just can't get with everyone. And I think that I guess for people who really don't feel connected in that way, and I was one of those people, I'd say, um, that's an important message to hear that maybe some people don't want to hear. Maybe, I don't know. But it's a great thing that I've experienced too.
yeah, and those kind of connections, you know, it's pretty obvious to most people, like a girlfriend or a spouse can really enrich your life. But I think all the connections that you can make in your life can also have, you know, similar effects. And you know, I think if you're having a compassionate mindset, you know, trying to let love guide your, not like in a boyfriend girlfriend kind of way, but like having love in your heart towards other beings, other human beings, like having that guide your actions will really strengthen the connections you're making with other people. And it really does, those things really do add a lot of value to your life. And that's one of the things I learned at the temple that was never explicitly taught. You know, it
Hmm.
was the love and the compassion were there, but it's like the hands-on of like living with people who are all trying to and a lot of them are come to the temple because they have difficulties in their lives. So you know, everything's not always rosy, but like we're all kind of having a similar goal of bettering ourselves. And the bonds you form over that can really add a lot of value to your life. And so you know, I learned a lot about people at the temple, and I think that is probably the thing that really helps me be a better teacher, is because I have so much experience with people and so much to draw from in that way.
That's so great. Like how do you what was there anything you changed about like your own like Zen center from the original one you went to, or what did you make sure to keep from your original teachings that you feel are absolutely important?
So I did change things. Like I'm not focused on martial arts in the same way my teacher is. That's just more out of you know, uh, logistical issues and having to have a big enough space to do that. But um, you know, one of the things I saw, because I saw a lot of people come and go, and different people had different levels of success in the practice.
Right.
Um, but one of the things I saw kind of people miss sometimes is my teacher could be very strict and very demanding. And I think if you looked at it on a very superficial level, you might think, oh, like, you know, following the rules is the most important thing. Uh, but then you can follow all the rules and not really get to where you're trying to go. Um, and the thing that I think most people that kind of have trouble is that's what they're seeing only that level. Like, oh,
Right.
he taught me these things, I have to follow these rules. And one of the things he it was kind of just inherent in everything he did, but it's one of the things I'm trying to emphasize a little more, is that he was loving and compassionate to all of his students. And if you don't have that, it's all the rules don't really matter. There's no real point to all these rules if you're not trying to help people in like, you know, it's in a loving way, where, you know, or in a kind way. You know, it's not always easy, and some lessons can't be sugar coated, you know, but as long as there's like in your heart that you're trying to help, I think that is like the core thing that I'm really trying to emphasize,
That's
aside from
amazing.
like learning how to meditate and focus on things and use art. You know, those are all different approaches, but underlying all of that is trying to help people. And you know, if you have that approach, because everybody has challenges. I did. Every student you're going to encounter is going to have some sort of challenge and have shortcomings in their practice. And so if you're approaching that with love in your heart and compassion for the people, it just gives you so much more patience as a teacher. And so those are the things I'm really, I wouldn't say it's different than my teacher, but you know, the school I came from, but I'm trying to emphasize that. And I think that that's another one of the things like I learned from my teacher, but I never learned. I went to school in college, and I never really, you know, and I heard the golden rule, but I never heard someone say, like, really explain to me the importance of compassion, and then really show it to me through their actions. You know, maybe my parents did, but you know, like my teacher did that too. And I, you know, prior to meeting him, I had no relationship with him, but he was just there to help everybody who came through the door, you know. So
It's so
um
amazing.
you know, that's another one of the things, aside from like turning everything you do into a meditation, but I see the other, you know, leg of what I'm teaching is I'm trying to help people understand the importance of being compassionate. And I think if we all as like a society just really started to understand that, so many of the issues we have would go away, you know.
It's probably
um
true.
yeah, so and that's not something that's being emphasized in like any profession or business school, or you know, I think it's starting to get some traction, but um
So what do you think's in the way of people like realizing that and that becoming more of a accepted value compared to other values?
well, I think it's actually kind of natural to you know, there's a and I think it's rooted, and this goes into Buddhist practice. I can kind of explain that a little bit, but I think it's rooted in our survival instincts, in
Mm.
that like we have to eat. We have to like I can say all I want about compassion, but if I just feed other people and I don't eat myself, that's gonna I'm gonna die. So so we have this thing about survival where we have to take things for ourselves. And most of the time, even if you're a vegetarian, you're killing something to feed yourself. And so in Buddhist terms, that's creating karma. So you're always like, just by living, you're going to have to create karma. And that is one of the things that kind of will blind you to this other bigger truth. And I think we get caught up in different versions of that, you know, like obviously eating, but then like you get in this kind of, I think it comes from our nature to survive, you know, that we think we need to stockpile resources and things like that. And we do. That's part of living. You need to have food for the next meal. So,
Mm,
but I think we go a little bit overboard with that and become too focused on that. And we forget about the bigger picture and how, like our community and our connections are actually just as important as the food we
right.
eat. Like, so, but it becomes easy, in our society now where you don't necessarily depend on your neighbors as much for day-to-day things to just think, oh, I can just make money, feed myself, get all the things I need, and I don't really have to go out and be a part of the community. But like if you take yourself completely out of that, you'll be miserable. So I think people kind of understand it, but I think like we become hyper focused on the survival things, and then it kind of snowballs, and then you think you need more and more and more. And if you're not constantly, and this is in Zen why we meditate, is to clear out those attachments that like, oh, I think I need this, I need that. And then if you and this is the importance of the ritual, if once a day you're clearing your mind out and starting from a base level of emptiness, and then you can kind of see more realistically like, oh, what should my priorities be? Do I really need to get a fancier car or a bigger house? Or would my time be better spent like surrounding myself, meeting good people, investing in
Yeah,
my relationships, things like that. And I think a lot of people, you meet a lot of, you know, I see this online, like a lot of successful people, you ask
right.
them what's the most important. And yeah, they already have tons of money, so it's easy for them to say, but they always say it's like friends and family, you know? So, but I think for me, like it really did take me having to get a good job, make a bunch of money, and then realize, oh, this isn't it. And so
Yeah,
sometimes you have to go down that road to find out it's a dead end, you know?
with your engineering job that
Yeah.
you had.
Yeah. So, I think I had at first I thought the root of my problems was I didn't have enough money, you know, because like I couldn't do all the things I wanted to do. And then when I had
Yeah,
that, I was like, okay, that wasn't it. And then it kind of, so I think a lot of people get stuck in that. And it's something, it's kind of programmed in through different social pressures and now social media, the influencers and things like that kind of emphasize like, oh, I have all these cool things and
true.
this is what makes, everything cool. And it's just, yeah, I'm sure, a fast car is nice, but I think, um, I think there's just limits to all of that, and that,
Definitely.
there's a, so you get plenty of people influencing you in the way that say like these material things are important to your life, and on a certain level they are, but I just think we don't have enough people saying, oh, and teaching people like, oh, this is another part of life that's equally or more important than that, and this is how you can get better at that part of your life. And so that's kind of why like why I do things like have a YouTube channel and write a book, is because I'm trying to help other people understand that. And it took me a long time to figure that out. So
Yeah,
if I can help people figure it out faster, and I think the faster we all figure it out, the better off the world's going to be. There was like a rule at the temple: you're never supposed to take more than you need. So, like if you take food, you always had to eat whatever you put on your plate. And you weren't allowed to
right.
leave any scraps on the plate. Like that was one of the bigger sins you could make, is like taking food and not finishing it. um so it's just like constantly programming you there. It's like a counter programming, like showing you like this is what you need. And that's one of the things that kind of came out of it living there is like I realized I don't need all that much. And that's kind of like actually was a really powerful thing is realizing, oh, you don't really need much. And then that kind of frees you up to do so many different things. Um,
That makes a lot of sense. I guess like leaving that extra food is like by it in its own way as a form of service because you're not taking more than you need. It's available for someone else. Like even though
yeah.
it's like it's not like you're doing something necessarily in the same way that's service, but in I guess in a way it is service, not doing more, taking more than you need.
Yeah, and I think some Buddhists have like vows of poverty and things like that, monks, things like that. I never had to do that, but it was kind of like those little things were built into your day. And if someone told me I needed to take a vow of poverty when I was 20 something, I would have been like, forget about it. That's not for me. Right. But like having my teacher was really instrumental in like showing me like you don't have to be extreme. There's a middle way. You just take what you need, and it's built into the temple lifestyle.
Right.
And so I think that for me was like how I was able to learn some of these more important lessons without going to like extremes. And I wasn't like a big fan of rules and people telling me like what to do. So I think he just had like a really good balance of giving you a rule. There were rules, but there was context and there was meaning behind them, and
Right.
so I'm hoping to be able to provide that. Um, I don't have a residential program right now, but I would love to do that someday, just to take that on.
That would
Um,
be so cool, like an art Zen like residential program. I wonder if any of those exist. Maybe you'd be the first one.
yeah, there's certainly not many of them here. So where I live, so I would love to do that, and it's kind of like a long-term goal of mine.
That's
But
so cool.
I spent 16 years living in a temple, not really thinking about how to make these types of businesses and stuff. So I have a lot to learn now that I'm not there. Yeah.
Well, that's good. I guess it's good to take your time and not like jump into the water when you don't know how to swim. You got to learn like certain things, and then you'll probably be ready to take on more stuff when the like maybe sooner than later. But you know,
Yeah. And my thing was when I left the temple, I did have some people kind of offer to help me build like a facility, physical facility, things like that. But I didn't really want to build it in my own. I didn't want to build it for what I thought it need. I wanted to have a community and then have whatever facilities we have function only to serve that community. And so right
oh,
now I'm kind of like in the community building stage.
that's great.
Um, so yeah, like people have talked about like, well, why don't you make this a destination place or something like that? And I'm like, well, I'd rather just build a community and then figure out like have the community determine what kind of facilities we need. Like I don't have I don't think it should be up to me to decide what other people need.
Who's what historical figure like that you've read in Zen Buddhism has influenced you the most?
Yeah, in Zen it's typically there are no scriptures or texts that you learn from. It's from um you have to learn from a teacher. And so once I got into this practice, I just really focused on learning from my teacher. So I don't have like a lot but there are Zen writers. It's just not typically, and you can learn a lot from reading them. Um, but I'm not like super familiar with them. I will name number one, since you did ask specifically, and this isn't a historical figure. Like my teacher's teacher, great Zen master Sung San wrote the Compass of Zen, and that does have a lot of historical names in there of teachers, very famous Zen teachers. Unfortunately, I can't name them all,
Right.
but there are lessons in there that were, part of what was taught to me. So that would be like one really great resource
That's
for
great.
learning the types of, philosophical underpinning of the types of stuff that I learned. Um, some other books that I did read, I love Taoism. So the Tao Te Ching, Taoism kind of combined with Buddhism when it moved to China and became Chan, which is Zen.
Oh,
So they're very closely related. And so that was one of the books I was reading prior to moving into the temple. So that would be one. And I used to have a pocket version of that I would carry around with me. So that
that's
one
cool.
I would highly recommend. Um, Another one I really enjoyed, I can't remember the author, but it was The Unfettered Mind, which is it's letters from a Zen master to a sword master. And
Oh,
it's,
wow.
yeah, so that one really resonated with me. Um, I read that very early on when I was living at the temple. I wish I could think of the name of the author, but those would be a few of them. There's probably a lot of names that I should mention, and I just unfortunately, like that's probably one of the weakest things is my historical knowledge of Zen and Buddhism. It was never really my focus. I really was all about the practical application of these lessons.
In a certain way, that seems very Zen.
Yeah, and at first, when I first moved into the temple, I was like, "Well, aren't we supposed to learn the history?" And then I realized that's not really what it's about. It's about applying the lessons to your own life, and that's really what I learned. And I think my teaching style is very similar in that way.
I'm a music producer.
Nice.
I love art. I feel like for me, art's been meditative as well. I've never done like formal Zen training, but I notice that like the time goes quicker. Do you experience that?
Yeah, and I think when you get to a deeper state of meditation, it becomes almost timeless, you know.
Really?
And I try to actually impart to people to kind of explain what moving meditation is like. When I do martial arts, when I'm really focused, I can reach a flow state. And I think from what I'm not a musician, but I have some musician friends, and also you can kind of just sense it though. Like when you're watching a really good musician, they reach a flow state as well, where um, whatever they're playing just seems to flow through them without thought. But yet you're still very, like if you're playing in a band, I imagine you're still very aware of what everybody else in the band is doing, even though you're not really thinking about it. You just have like a more keen awareness of everything going on around you. Have you ever experienced anything like that as a musician?
Oh yeah, I was drumming in bands starting when I was 15. So I started as a drummer and then I became a singer and a rapper. So like I really like notice it with everything that I do. It's like I I can feel everything like without thinking about it. Like I'll like when I'm producing, I'll like put a compressor randomly. I know the buttons to hit. I'm just listening to the sounds, or I'll if I'm drumming, it was always like just happens. Like I would just listen to what's happening around me. Uh,
Yeah. So what I'm trying to help people understand is that your whole life can become like that. It's just a matter of learning how to take that and apply that level of focus to everything you're doing. And the only thing that stops you is when thinking starts to come in and your mind starts
Yeah.
to wander like out of this moment. So there's a saying in Zen that you're supposed to say moment by moment, stay in the moment, and have moment by moment focus. So I think you've definitely seemed to have experienced that through music. I experienced it through martial arts. I'd felt it in other portions of my life prior to that, but I didn't really understand what it was until my teacher started to explain it to me. And then I started to actively try to apply that kind of focus to other parts of my life. And then it's like any exercise. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And yeah, so you
Yeah.
probably have you don't have to call it meditation for it to be meditation, right? So but I think you have probably meditated more than you realize.
That's interesting. Because I have a very good like formal Tibetan teacher that
Yep.
I'm friends with, and like I take his advice a lot, and like I feel like sometimes that I have meditated a lot more than I even know. So I appreciate you as a master understanding that he does too. He really respects where I come from, but it seems like that's been like something you've really focused on, like the different kinds. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think it does help in certain regards that I do believe, sitting meditation should also be a part of it. It's just a different form of the same thing. And yeah, so the whole idea is just to keep your mind clear, and when your mind is clear, you can um, make better decisions and see kind of tap into the connections to the other parts of the world that you might not be aware of in a more awakened state, as they would say in Buddhism. You know, it's
Yeah. So how would you define what a clear mind is, like to someone who doesn't know? I'm curious what you see it as.
well, there's different degrees to that, I think, but to get really far down so I think there's one thing where one state of a clear mind where you're not thinking too much. So your thoughts aren't rolling around in your head, and your mind is wandering to other, to the past, thinking about your friends, your family, the future. Though that is all letting your mind come out of this moment, and I think that can kind of it can taint what you're doing in the moment if your mind is not completely in the moment. So
Right.
that's one form of keeping your mind focused is one way of having a clear mind. And that's essentially what we teach in Zen through meditation, and also what I'm trying to teach through these moving meditations. In the larger, more like metaphysical quest of enlightenment, if you will, the idea is that you reach a state of mind where you transcend all thinking,
Oh,
and then all of the boundaries of everything no longer exist, because every word you use, every thought you use creates um, a conceptual boundary around things that's not actually a real thing. So we use those things to navigate the world, but it ultimately they cut you off from seeing the truth about how nature is. And so the word for that in Buddhism is dharma, the truth of nature, or the natural truth. So koans, the other part of Zen practice are koans in traditional Zen practice. Uh, Koans are questions which are supposed to get you to think about things in a different way. They kind of challenge your logical and rational approach to thinking, and force you to think about things a little deeper. So one of the big questions in trying to understand the Dharma is understanding like the nature of who you are. So one of the big questions that we're trying to understand that my teacher always gave us was, who are you? Or what is your mind? And in Korean, mind and heart are the same word. So it's not your brain. It's kind of like the foundation of who you are and the essence of your being. So that is one of the fundamental questions we're trying to answer and find out through the meditation practice. So when you're meditating and clearing your mind, the only way you can understand what your mind is by completely clearing it out. And then once it's completely empty, then you can, what my teacher would say is, see your mind, but you're not seeing it with your eyes. When you can see your mind, that is in Zen what we call getting enlightenment.
That's cool. And is that in Zen, is that's like something that happens for different lengths of time depending on your experience, or is that a permanent state?
Um, well, yeah, it's a permanent state, but in that, once you experience that, that experience is always a part of you. But everybody everybody thinks, everybody has things come into their mind. So I think you can always have things happen on a spectrum or different degrees of awareness. Um, that experience is eternally part of you. The experience of enlightenment is eternally part of you. But as long as you have a body, that's always going to introduce some form of suffering. Um, the difference between enlightened and not enlightened is that you're not attached to the suffering, and it comes and goes instantaneously. So in Buddhism, they call that state nirvana, when you've attained freedom from suffering, and it's kind of like akin to the idea of heaven. It's not exactly in the same sense as other religions, perhaps, but um, when you're not attached to your suffering, you can be in heaven in any moment.
Okay, that makes sense. And I'll ask one final question um, before your time's up. If you could only give one wisdom to someone who hasn't studied Zen before, what would it be?
Learn how to listen to your heart and your intuition, and follow that. If and that is why we meditate and try to keep our minds clear when we practice Zen, is so that we can learn how to listen to that intuition and learn how to let that guide our actions. Um, Everybody has a unique path that they have to walk in their life, and no one else can walk that for you. And I think trying to find your own personal reason for living and for your life is one of the most important things you can do to add value to your life. And it's not always easy to do, but it's one of the most worthwhile things you can do, and one of the best ways you can direct your energy is really finding out what your unique calling is. And it might be at work, it might be somewhere else in your life. Um, but just learning how to kind of tune out all of the external influences that might be misdirecting you, and really learn what's important to you and what you want to focus on.
That's
And
great. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for uh, talking with me today. And thanks
yeah,
everyone who's listened to the talk. Uh, um, Appreciate it.
I think we're pushing our luck at this point. um, I did appreciate the interview. I think you got me into some thought-provoking areas. So I hope your listeners and appreciate it, and hopefully you can get some good content despite the technical difficulties.
Oh, sure. No problem. It doesn't bother me.